Welcome to your first CompSci video notes. You should have a worksheet that looks exactly like what you see on the screen right now. It's called if-else statements. So today we're going to talk about how to write some methods, because on some upcoming tests you're going to have to write methods without the computers. You're going to have to be able to write perfect code, perfect syntax, make a hierarchy chart to show me a plan of what you're going to do. And we'll do that with some if-else examples. So all of these instructions say design a hierarchy chart and code for each of the following examples. Now remember, for these videos, I'm expecting that you're going to take notes just as you normally would in class. To prove that you've watched the video and taken the notes, you're going to show me a copy of the notes when you finish watching it. Then I'll check you off for it. Okay, so number one says print the numbers from 1 to 10 that are even. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a hierarchy chart. And for this hierarchy chart, we need to make a method. So we got to name the method. I'm going to call it printNums. And I don't want to just go through the method and print system.out.print to system.out.print 4, system.out.print 6. That's not what I'm looking for here. Assume that I could ask you a question, print the numbers from 1 to 1,000,000 that are even, and then it would be obnoxious and pretty impossible to write all of that out. So what could we use that would start at 1, go all the way up to 10? For loop. Whenever we know exactly how many times we want to look for something, we use a for loop. So that's my little symbol for a loop. I'm going to write times 10 out here to show you that you're doing it 10 times, so it's a for loop. And then inside that, what do you want to do every time? Well, if the number's even, you want to print it out. If it's not, we're going to not print it out. How can you check if a number is even? Hopefully you're thinking mod. Mod 2, divisible by 2. So if whatever the number variable is, so if number mod 2 equals 0, if the answer to that is yes, we're going to print the number. And if the answer is no, you don't really need to do anything. Okay, so rather than make a variable called number, since we already have a variable that's running this loop that's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, we can use our loop variable, our I. So now that I've written the hierarchy chart, now we're going to write out the code. Okay, so we're just making a method. It's not a full program. The method's called printNum. So we got to start with public void printNums. And the only thing inside here we've got is a for loop. So I'm going to start for int I equals, oops, we want 1 here. I'm going to run as long as I is less than or equal to 10, I++. And then inside this for loop, we're going to check if that loop variable, if that mod 2, so if I mod 2 double equals, because we're checking if something is equal, not setting it equal to 0, we want to print that out. So we're going to say system.out.print. It doesn't really matter if you do print or print ln. I'm not that picky here. And we want to print out the number that's even. So what are we going to print out? I. If I is 2, 2 mod 2 is 0, so we print out I. You'll get the 2 to print out. If I is odd, 1 mod 2 is not 0, so it's not going to print it out. So since nothing's happening in the no case up here, I don't need an else statement. So just an if, we can end the for loop, end the public void, and we're done. Any questions? If you do have a question, don't forget, just hit pause on the video, raise your hand, and I will be right over. Or if you're watching this at home, just make a note in your notes that you had a question at this point, and then when you see me in class the next day, ask me right away, and I'll clear it up for you. All right, let's go on to number 2. Given a number, print a message that states if the number is even or if it is odd. So this is slightly different because it says given a number. This is just printing the number, so it wasn't given anything. So technically, we'd have to have like some sort of get info method where the person says, please enter a number, and we have num equals in dot next int, that kind of thing. That's not what I'm asking you to write though. So anytime you see given a number in your hierarchy chart, just make a note that you're going to have, you're going to have a variable called getNum. And by variable I mean method. You're going to have a method called getNum. And the purpose of that method is it gets number from the user. And when you see the homework and test for this, you'll see that it'll say, the directions will say stuff like assume the method getNum is written and works as intended. So that means you don't have to write it. What you do have to write is the method that's going to print a message that states if it's even or if it's odd. So what do you want to call that method? I think even or odd is a great option. And here I want to write what that method's going to do. So if it's even, so same as last time, how are we going to check if num is even? Mod again. So if num mod 2 double equals, because we're checking if it's equal to 0. If it's yes, we're just going to print even. And this time we do have a no, because we want to print if it's even or if it's odd. So if it's no, we're going to print odd. Okay, and that's good enough for our hierarchy chart. Okay, now for the code. Again, I just want to show that we're taking a variable. In this case, I have to make a variable called num. I didn't have to do this in the last one because we just used our loop variable, but there's no for loop this time. So I have to create a variable. We'll call it int num. I'm going to call the method getNum. And you know, technically you would do this in like you'd have a run method, you'd say getNum and then even or odd, but we're being a little bit relaxed here. Our main purpose is to write this method called even or odd. So now I'm going to write public void even or odd. Okay, and it's just pretty much exactly what our hierarchy chart says. If num mod 2 equals 0, so if num mod 2 equals 0, remember that double equals is always because we're checking if it's equal. We want to print out even. Now don't write SOP even. I know what you mean, but that's going to lose you points. I want to see, since this has to be perfect code, it has to be system.out.print, and again it can be print or println, I don't really care, even. Now I intentionally made a mistake in that last line. Anyone know what it is? Right, even needs to have quotes around it. Because we're printing out the word even as opposed to a variable called even. This time, since there's a no response, we do have an else. So we got to say else. System.out.println. And I could do print or println again. Quotes odd. And the else and the public void. All right. Any questions now? If you're good, then we'll go on. If not, pause it again and either write a note or raise your hand and ask me. Over on the back, number 3, given a number, add 3 to it if it is not divisible by 3. So again, we're given a number. That's going to come into play here. So we'll start with our hierarchy chart. What's the first thing you're going to have in your hierarchy chart? should have getNum, because it says given a number again. Just write a quick description of what that does. Gets number. And then we have to make a method that we're going to add 3 to it if it's not divisible by 3. So let's call this div by 3. And I will say if, how are we going to check if it's divisible by 3? Num mod 3. If num mod 3 double equals 0, because we're checking if it's equal. If the answer is yes, we're going to add 3 to it. So whatever that num was, it's now going to equal num plus 3. And oops, I made a mistake. That's if it's not divisible by 3. So how do I change this to make it not? Remember, not means the exclamation point. So instead of double equals, we're going to have not equal to. If it is divisible by 3, I don't want to do anything to it. So in the no case, I really have nothing to do. Okay, time to write the code. What's the first thing I need in my code? Not div by 3 and not even getNum. Remember, we have to make a variable. So int num, just like last time, is going to be the number that's going to be given to me from the user. Then what? Then you write getNum, because we got to make sure that that method gets called so I can have some value stored in that number. And now I want to do the method divisible by 3. So now we're going to have public void div by 3. Remember the double parentheses after that. Inside here we have an if statement. If that num variable mod 3 is not equal to 0, they're going to add 3 to it. So num equals num plus 3. For your semicolon there. We're not doing anything to it if it is divisible by 3. So there's no else this time. So we just got to end the public void, and that one's done. All right, last one down here. Given a number, determine whether it is greater than, less than, or equal to 10. Print the appropriate message. So now we got 3 options. Either it's greater than 10, it's less than 10, or it's equal than 10. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier, but not too bad. What's our first thing in our hierarchy chart? GetNum, because it says given a number. So GetNum gets the number again. And then what do you want to call this method? You can call it whatever you want, but I called mine compare to 10. Okay, so if, let's check less than first. If the number is less than 10, the answer to that is yes. We're going to print less. If the answer is no, I can't print greater because I still have an option. Either it's greater than or equal to. So we actually have another if statement in the no here. So if num is greater than 10, here for the yes, we will print greater. And then what can I do in the no over here? Well, at this point, the only other option, it's not less than, it's not greater than, so we can just print equal. Okay, ready for the code? Well, ready or not, here it comes. Okay, so for the code, I'm actually going to show you 2 different ways. I'm going to show you one way that mirrors exactly what we just wrote in the hierarchy chart, which is totally fine. another way that's maybe a little bit faster. Okay, so what's our first thing in the code? Variables. Don't forget the variables. We're getting a number again. So I need something called int num. What's next? We got to get the number. So it'll get num. That's next. Now we're ready to write our method. We're going to do public void compare to 10. Don't forget your double parentheses. Be careful how you label these two. Remember, methods start with lowercase. I know that kind of looks a little bit bigger, but that should be a lowercase c, and then any other word inside it is capital. Okay, so if I follow exactly what I wrote in the hierarchy chart, we're going to start with if num is less than 10. We're going to print out less. So system.out.print, remember my quotes, less. Now the no, remember, is the else, and inside that's another if statement. So how that looks is I write else first. In this whole else statement, I can put another if. I can say if num is greater than 10, system.out.print greater. So if you're following a hierarchy chart, I just did no. If num is greater than 10, we printed greater. So I have a no response to that too. So if that's my if, my no response to that if, keep it all lined up. So still inside the other else is that it's equal. System.out.print equal. So we're going to end that else statement. We're going to end the first else statement. Then we also have to end the bracket for the public void. Okay, so that's called a nested if-else. I have an if-else within another if-else. And if you had 4 options, you would have to do 2 nested if-elses. Before I go on, I did intentionally make one mistake in this public void compare to 10. Did anyone catch it? All the system.out.prints should have semicolons. Okay, so this nested if-else can get pretty messy after a while. So another option is to do something called else if. So just off to the side here, I'm going to try to squeeze in what I generally do. So the beginning would still be the same. You'd still have int num, you'd still have get num, you'd still have public void compare to 10. But then inside here, I'd start again just like I did last time. So if num is less than 10, we'd print out less. And I know I told you couldn't abbreviate, but just for the sake of my room here, I'm going to have to. But instead of writing, since I have another option, instead of doing this nested thing, there's actually something where I can do this in one step. I can say else if, so all in one line, and then have another qualification. Num is greater than 10. System.out.print greater. And then the last option, the equal. You could write else if num double equals 10, but if you know this is your last option, you can still just do else with no qualification after it. And just say system.out.print equal. Okay, so what I just wrote in green here could also go inside public void compare to 10, and it would do exactly the same stuff that you just did. So this is what you're going to typically see me do. And the nice thing about that is if there were, let's say there's 5 options, first option could be if, second could be else if, you could have another else if, and then another else if, and then end with else at the end. And just like with regular if-else statements, you don't have to end with an else. You can just start with if and keep doing else if, else if, else if, else if, all the way to the end if you want. But since they're still connected with those else's, if the number's less than 10, if this first one gets hit, it'll ignore everything after it. But if this first thing is not true, then it is going to check this, and it'll keep checking until it finds one that's true. If it never finds one that's true, it'll just do that last one. Okay, so that's the end of your if-else statement notes. So hopefully you took good notes. If you have any questions, come ask me before we move on. But before you move on, definitely get me to check this note sheet off so that you've got credit for doing it. All right, good luck.